The sound of Gary's laughter still echoed in my kitchen when he said those words. Mom's gone, and you're next. I need this land for my future, not your memories. Everyone at the table went quiet, forks suspended midair. I didn't say anything, but something inside me turned to stone. I walked to my study and pulled out the deed to the 40 acres, the deed that had my name, not his. By morning, I had called the county office and revoked his usage rights. Gary would find out when he tried to plant next season. This was just the beginning. 2 hours earlier, my kitchen had been filled with the warm chaos of Sunday dinner. Gary's kids were arguing over the last dinner roll while his wife Rebecca served my famous apple pie, the recipe my late Martha had passed down. The November sun streamed through the curtains, catching the steam rising from the coffee cups. Dad, you outdid yourself with the harvest this year, Gary said, cutting into his pie. That east field produced better than we expected. I smiled, watching my grandkids. Little Emma, barely 6, was carefully picking out the apple pieces from her slice, while 10-year-old Michael devoured his portion with the enthusiasm only children possess. Your grandmother always said that field had the richest soil. She was right about most things. She sure was, Rebecca chimed in, patting Emma's head. Emma, eat the apples too, sweetheart. Grandpa worked hard growing them. But they're mushy, Mommy. Emma wrinkled her nose. That's what makes them sweet, little one, I said, remembering how Martha used to make the same face when she was young. The memory brought both warmth and a sharp pang of loss. Gary nodded, then leaned forward with that excited look he got when discussing business. Actually, Dad, that's what I wanted to talk to everyone about. Rebecca and I have been thinking about our future. Oh, I set down my coffee cup, interested. Michael was listening too, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. We've got big plans. The kids are getting older, and we want to give them the best opportunities. Private schools, college funds, Tell them about the swimming pool. Emma suddenly perked up, clapping her hands together. Daddy says we're going to have our own swimming pool. Rebecca squeezed Gary's hand, her cheeks flushing with excitement. Tell them about the house, honey. Gary's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. We're going to build our dream home. Not just any house, a real showcase. For 1,000 square feet, indoor pool, 3-car garage. The works. Emma will have her own playroom, and Michael can have that workshop he's been wanting for his model trains. Michael's face brightened. Really, Dad? A whole room just for my trains? The biggest room you've ever seen, buddy? Gary ruffled his son's hair. I felt a flutter of pride watching my son's enthusiasm. My son was ambitious, just like I taught him. That sounds wonderful, Gary. Your mother would have loved knowing her grandchildren would have such opportunities. Where are you thinking of building? He grinned and gestured toward the window, where the golden November light painted the fields in warm hues. Right here, Dad. On the farm. The words hung in the air like smoke. The cheerful chatter of the children suddenly seemed distant. I blinked, not quite understanding. What do you mean, son? Well, I've been talking to developers. Gary's voice picked up pace, the way it always did when he was nervous but trying to sound confident. Turner Construction offered me $800,000 for the whole property. Can you believe it? $800,000. With that kind of money, we can build the house and still have plenty left over for investments. Maybe even buy that cabin by the lake we always talked about. The warmth in the room seemed to evaporate. My grandchildren continued chattering, Emma now building a small mountain out of her apple pieces, unaware that their grandfather's world had just shifted beneath his feet. Gary? I said carefully, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. You know the land isn't yours to sell. His face flushed slightly, and Rebecca's smile faltered. Dad, come on. You're 69. What are you going to do with 40 acres? I've been farming it for 7 years. I put my sweat and blood into that soil. I've made it productive again after you started slowing down. The last comment stung. I'd never slowed down. I'd simply trusted my son to take over more responsibility. It's still my land, Gary. But for how long? The words came out sharper than he'd intended, cutting through the Sunday dinner warmth like a cold blade. Rebecca's face went pale, and she reached for Emma's hand. The children fell silent, their childish instincts picking up on the sudden tension. Gary tried to backtrack, but his frustration showed through like water through a cracked dam. "Look, Dad, we have to be realistic here. You're not getting any younger. Mom's gone, and frankly, you're next. I need this land for my future, not your memories." The silence that followed was absolute. My daughter-in-law stared at her plate as if it contained the answers to life's mysteries. The kids looked confused, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Michael's fork clattered against his plate as he set it down. "Grandpa!" Emma's small voice broke the silence. "Why is everyone so quiet?" I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud. "Excuse me?" I said quietly, my voice betraying none of the storm raging inside. "I need to check on something." As I walked toward my study, I heard Rebecca's whispered voice. "Gary, what have you done?" I walked to my study and closed the door behind me. The room still smelled faintly of Martha's lavender sachets, even 2 years after she'd passed. Her picture smiled at me from the desk, the same desk where we'd signed the deed to this property in 1978. She was wearing that blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one that brought out her eyes. "What would you do, Martha?" I whispered to the photograph. "How do we save our boy from himself?" I pulled out the filing cabinet and found the folder marked Property Documents. Inside was the deed, clear as daylight. Henry Cole, sole owner. Gary's name appeared nowhere on it. I stared at that document and remembered the day we'd bought this place. Martha had been 8 months pregnant with Gary, rubbing her belly as we walked through the empty farmhouse. The previous owners, the Hendersons, had let the place run down after their son died in Vietnam. Weeds grew through the porch boards, and half the windows were cracked. "It needs love," Martha had said, her hand tracing the dusty windowsill. "But look at that view, Henry. Look at all that space for children to run. He's going to love growing up here," she'd whispered as we signed the papers. "All this space to run and play. We'll have the biggest Christmas trees, and he can learn to drive the tractor, and maybe we'll even get him a pony." This was the same Gary who'd had his first birthday party in our backyard, chasing fireflies in tiny overalls while Martha clapped from the porch swing. The same boy who'd helped me plant his first tomato garden at age 6. His small hands carefully placing seeds in the earth with the seriousness of a surgeon. "When will they grow, Daddy?" He'd asked every single day for 2 weeks, kneeling in the dirt to examine each tiny plant for signs of progress. "Patience, son," I told him. "Good things take time." I remembered teaching him to drive the old John Deere when he turned 14. He'd been so proud, sitting up straight in that faded green seat, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He'd concentrated intensely on keeping the rows straight, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "I'm going to be the best farmer in Iowa, Dad," he declared. "Better than Old Man Peterson, better than the Hartley boys, better than anyone." "It's not about being better than anyone else, Gary," I'd said. "It's about being good to the land, so the land will be good to you." When Gary got married, Martha and I had given them $23,000 for their wedding, money we'd saved by growing our own vegetables and mending our own clothes for 3 years. Martha had sewn Rebecca's wedding dress herself, working late into the night by lamplight to get every pearl and lace detail perfect. When their first child was born, I'd rebuilt the nursery in their house myself, spending $4,200 on materials and 3 weeks of evenings after my own work was done. I'd painted clouds on the ceiling and built shelves shaped like teddy bears. Martha had knitted blankets in soft pastels, humming lullabies as her needles clicked. Over the past 7 years, I'd let Gary use the 40 acres rent-free. The going rate for farmland in our county was $180 per acre per year. That meant I'd essentially given him $50,400 in free rent. Last spring, when the storms damaged his equipment, I'd paid $15,000 out of my retirement savings to repair his machinery. "It's an investment in the family business," I told Martha's sister when she questioned the expense. "Gary's going to take care of us in our old age." But now I wondered if I'd been investing in my son's future or subsidizing his sense of entitlement. This was the same property where Martha and I had planned to spend our golden years. We talked about converting the old barn into a workshop where I could teach woodworking to local kids. Martha had wanted to start a small herb garden, maybe sell produce at the farmer's market on weekends. When we're too old to farm, she'd said, holding my hand as we sat on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the sky. We can lease out the fields and live off the income. We'll never have to worry about money. And maybe Gary will build a little house nearby, and we can watch our grandchildren grow up. Now Martha was gone, buried in the cemetery 3 miles down the road under a simple granite stone that read, "Beloved wife and mother." And my son was trying to sell her dreams to the highest bidder. I didn't cry. I calculated. Martha and I had paid $47,000 for this land in 1978. Today, similar properties in our area were selling for $12,000 to $15,000 per acre. 40 acres at $14,000 each meant our land was worth approximately $560,000. Not the $800,000 Gary claimed. Either he was lying about the developer's offer, or Turner Construction was planning something that would require rezoning permits. I spent the next 3 hours in my study while Gary's family finished their dinner and left. Through the thin walls, I could hear fragments of conversation. Rebecca's worried voice, Gary's defensive tone, the children asking why Grandpa was taking so long. I heard him call out, "We'll talk later, Dad," before their car doors slammed and they drove away. The house felt emptier than usual after they left, filled with the echo of broken expectations and the lingering smell of apple pie. At 10 o'clock that night, I was still at my desk when the phone rang. The sound was jarring in the quiet house. "Dad." Gary's voice sounded uncertain, lacking the confidence he displayed at dinner. "Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot today. Maybe I didn't explain things clearly." "You explained them perfectly," I said, my voice steady as granite. "I don't want you to think I'm trying to push you out or anything. You'll always have a place with us. We're thinking about adding a nice little apartment to the new house. You'd have your own entrance, your own kitchen, maybe even a small sitting room where you can keep Mom's things. It'll be great." I let him talk. He painted pictures of family dinners in his new dining room, grandchildren running through his professionally landscaped yard, holiday gatherings in his spacious living room with the vaulted ceilings and marble fireplace, all built on the ashes of my and Martha's dreams. "And think about it, Dad, with that kind of money we could set up college funds for Emma and Michael. Real ones, not just the little savings accounts we have now. They could go anywhere they want, study anything they want. Isn't that what you and Mom always wanted for your grandchildren?" The manipulation was subtle but clear. Use the children as leverage, make me the bad guy if I stood in the way of their opportunities. "What do you think, Dad? Are you willing to at least consider it?" "I think you should get some sleep, Gary. We'll talk soon." "But Dad dash." "Good night, son." I hung up and sat in the darkness, listening to the house settle around me. Outside, an owl called to its mate, a sound Martha had always loved. "That's the sound of home," she used to say. Monday morning at 8 o'clock sharp, I was sitting in the waiting room of Peterson, Walsh and Associates. Jim Peterson had handled our legal affairs for 15 years. He'd drawn up our wills, managed Martha's estate, and knew every detail of our financial situation. His waiting room still smelled like coffee and old leather, familiar and comforting. "Henry," he said, shaking my hand with the firm grip of a man who'd grown up on a farm himself. "What brings you in? You look like you haven't slept." I handed him Gary's usage agreement, a simple document we'd signed 7 years ago allowing him to farm the land. "I want to revoke this immediately." Jim read through it carefully, his practiced eye catching every detail. "This is pretty straightforward. You have the right to terminate this agreement with 30 days written notice. May I ask why? Last time we talked, you seemed pleased with Gary's management of the property." I explained Sunday's conversation, leaving out nothing. Jim's expression grew grim as I detailed Gary's assumptions about the land sale and his casual dismissal of my mortality. "Henry, I have to tell you something. Last month, Gary came to see me. He wanted to know about transferring property ownership from parent to child. Said you were interested in avoiding estate taxes. My blood ran cold. I never discussed that with him. I figured as much when you didn't follow up. I told him any transfer would require your explicit written consent and that you'd need independent legal representation. He seemed disappointed, kept pushing, asking about scenarios where the transfer might be expedited. What else did he ask about? Whether there were any liens on the property, whether you had any debts that might affect the title, whether there were any easements or restrictions that might impact development. Jim's voice carried a tone of professional concern. Henry, he wasn't asking these questions like someone planning to farm the land. He was asking like someone planning to develop it. Development, not farming. Development. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Gary had been planning this for months, maybe longer. The casual way he'd brought it up at Sunday dinner wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of careful calculation. That afternoon, I drove to Turner Construction's office in West Des Moines. The building was all glass and steel, trying to look modern and successful. The parking lot was full of expensive SUVs and pickup trucks with company logos. The receptionist, a young woman with bright purple nails and a smile that looked painted on, looked up from her computer screen. I'm Henry Cole. I believe you've been discussing a property purchase with my son Gary. Her face lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. Oh yes, Mr. Cole, we're so excited about your property. The location is perfect for our newest project. Your son has been so helpful in expediting everything. What kind of project? Sunset Meadows, luxury residential development. 43 homes starting at $600,000 each. We're targeting young professionals who want to live in a rural setting but still have access to Des Moines amenities. Your son mentioned you were very interested in moving forward quickly. I felt something settle in my chest like ice. Gary hadn't just been planning to sell. He'd been actively working with developers behind my back. What exactly did my son tell you? She pulled out a folder thick with documents and maps. He said you were elderly and looking to cash out your investment. He showed us a power of attorney document and said you'd given him authority to handle the sale because the details were too complicated for someone your age. There was no power of attorney. I'd never signed such a document. Miss, I said carefully, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The property isn't for sale. Her smile faltered like a flower in frost. But we've already submitted our development plans to the county. We've invested $30,000 in surveys and environmental testing. Mr. Cole assured us the sale was guaranteed. He said you were eager to move to a retirement community. I'm sorry for any confusion, but my son doesn't have the authority to sell my land. I left her staring at the folder, her purple nails drumming nervously on the desk like rain on a roof. That evening, Gary called 3 times. I didn't answer. The 4th time, he left a voicemail, and I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. Dad, we need to talk. There's been some kind of mix-up with Turner Construction. They called me all panicked about the sale. I don't know what you told them, but we need to fix this. Call me back. The desperation in his voice should have made me feel guilty. Instead, it confirmed what I'd suspected. Gary had made promises he couldn't keep, probably borrowed money against a sale that was never guaranteed. Tuesday morning, I was back at Peterson's office with a detailed plan that had kept me awake most of the night. I want to lease the land to the Prairie Learning Center, I told Jim. 40 parcels, 1 acre each, at $50 per year per parcel. Jim raised both eyebrows. That's significantly below market rate, Henry. Are you sure about this? Exactly. The lease terms will be for 20 years, with automatic renewal options. The land must be used exclusively for organic farming education and community gardening. Henry, this will make it impossible for Gary to develop the property, even if you were to, well, even if ownership transferred to him in the future. That's the idea, Jim. That's exactly the idea. We spent the morning drafting the agreements. The Prairie Learning Center was a non-profit organization that taught sustainable farming techniques to young people. They'd been looking for affordable land for 3 years, operating out of borrowed spaces and small rented plots. By Wednesday afternoon, I had signed agreements with the Prairie Learning Center and sent certified letters to Gary, Turner Construction, and the county planning office. Gary's 30-day notice to vacate would expire December 15th. The community garden project would begin January 1st. Thursday morning, Gary was pounding on my front door at 6 a.m., his fist hitting the wood like an angry woodpecker. "Dad, open up. We need to talk." I let him in. His hair was uncombed, his clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. His eyes were bloodshot, and he smelled like stale coffee and desperation. "What the hell is this?" He waved the certified letter in my face like an accusation. "You're kicking me off the farm? After everything I've done for you? Everything you've done for me?" I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "Gary, I want you to tell me about the power of attorney." His face went white as fresh snow. "What power of attorney?" "The one you showed Turner Construction. The one that supposedly gives you the right to sell my property." Dad, I can explain that." "I'm listening." I was trying to see what our options were. I never actually intended to." "You forged legal documents." "I didn't forge anything. I let them think you'd given me authorization." "It's not the same thing." I stared at my son. This man who'd learned to lie so smoothly that he probably believed his own words. "Get out, Gary." "Dad, please, let me explain. Rebecca doesn't know about any of this. The kids don't know. If this falls apart, we'll lose everything. We've already spent money on plans, on contractors, on—" "Dad, I borrowed against the development money. I owe people." "How much?" His shoulders sagged like a man carrying an invisible weight. $47,000. The exact amount Martha and I had paid for this land 47 years ago. The poetry of it was almost beautiful. "That's not my problem, Gary." "But it is. Don't you see? If you don't let me sell the land, I'll lose my house. Rebecca will leave me. My kids will grow up thinking their father is a failure. Maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to steal from me." "Steal?" His voice cracked like a teenager's. "Dad, I'm your son. This land is going to be mine anyway when you die. I'm just trying to maximize its value for all of us." "No, Gary. You're trying to cash in on my death while I'm still alive to see it." Friday morning brought a visit from Rebecca. She stood on my porch in her best dress, the navy blue one she wore to church, her eyes red from crying. Her hands shook as she knocked. "Mr. Cole, please." Gary told me everything. About the developer, about the money he borrowed. I had no idea. I invited her in, made coffee the way Martha used to, strong and black with just a hint of cinnamon. Rebecca sat at the kitchen table where just days ago we'd shared Sunday dinner. But now it felt like years had passed. "He's not a bad man," she said, her voice breaking like thin ice. He gets these ideas in his head. He wants to give us everything, and sometimes he doesn't think clearly about how to make it happen." I should have asked more questions when he started talking about the new house. I should have known we couldn't afford it. "Rebecca, did you know Gary told people I was senile?" She nearly dropped her coffee cup, and I watched the color drain from her face. "What?" Turner Construction's receptionist mentioned that Gary said I was elderly and confused, that I needed someone to handle my affairs. "Henry, I swear to you, I never heard him say that. If I had—" She started crying again, soft sobs that shook her shoulders. "He used to brag about you all the time. How smart you were, how you built this place from nothing, how you could fix anything. He was so proud to be your son. Used to. Before the land became valuable. Before he started seeing dollar signs instead of his father." I watched her cry and felt something soften in my chest. Not for Gary, but for her. For my grandchildren who were innocent victims in their father's schemes. "Rebecca, I want you to know that what happens between Gary and me doesn't change how I feel about you and the kids. You'll always be welcome in my home." "But what about Gary?" "That depends on Gary." December 15th came and went. Gary didn't remove his equipment from the property. Instead, he called the sheriff's department and claimed I was preventing him from accessing his machinery. "Deputy Morrison, A young man who'd gone to high school with my grandson arrived with his notepad and a confused expression. He looked barely old enough to shave, let alone handle family disputes. "Mr. Cole, your son says you're holding his equipment hostage." I handed Morrison copies of the usage agreement, the termination notice, and the certified mail receipts. "His right to use the property ended 2 weeks ago. The equipment is trespassing." "But sir, it's his equipment. On my land. Without permission." Morrison studied the documents like they were written in a foreign language, then radioed for his supervisor. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Williams arrived, a man who'd known our family for 30 years and had bought sweet corn from Martha's garden every summer. "Henry," he said, shaking my hand with genuine warmth, "this is a hell of a mess." "It's actually pretty simple, Tom. Gary has 48 hours to remove his equipment, or I can have it impounded." Gary arrived just as Sheriff Williams was explaining the situation, his truck kicking up dust clouds as he skidded to a stop. "Dad, be reasonable. It's December. Where am I supposed to store all that equipment? You had 30 days to figure that out. I can't afford to rent storage. You know that. Then maybe you shouldn't have spent money you didn't have on houses you can't afford." Sheriff Williams held up his hands like a referee. "Gentlemen, let's keep this civil. Henry, you're within your legal rights. Gary, you have 48 hours. After that, I'll have to treat this as trespassing." Gary's face was red with anger and humiliation. "This isn't over, Dad. You can't just throw away your family like this." "I'm not throwing away my family, Gary. I'm protecting it from you." January 3rd was the coldest day of the winter, but 40 people showed up for the Prairie Learning Center's opening ceremony. Local news crews filmed as children and teenagers broke ground on their first community garden plots, their breath visible in the frigid air as they laughed and worked. Sarah Martinez from Channel 8 interviewed me as the cameras rolled. Her professional smile warmed despite the cold. "Mr. Cole, what inspired you to donate your land to this educational project?" "My late wife and I always believed that land should nurture future generations, not just line someone's pockets. These kids will learn where food comes from, how to work with their hands, how to take care of the earth. Some people might say this is an unusual use for such valuable property. Value isn't just about money, Sarah. It's about legacy. These gardens will be here long after I'm gone, teaching kids and feeding families. That's worth more than any subdivision." The interview aired that evening. Within an hour, my phone was ringing with calls from neighbors, friends, and strangers congratulating me on the project. Old Mrs. Henderson from down the road called to say she'd been inspired to start her own small garden. The local 4-H club asked if they could bring their members to learn. Gary called too. "I saw you on TV," he said. His voice was hollow, defeated. "How are you doing, son?" "Rebecca filed for divorce last week. She took the kids to her mother's house. The bank foreclosed on our house yesterday. I'm living in a rented room above Murphy's bar." I felt no satisfaction in his pain, only sadness for what he'd chosen to become. "I'm sorry, Gary." "Are you? Because it feels like you planned all this. Like you wanted to destroy me. I wanted to protect what your mother and I built together. You chose to see that as a threat instead of a responsibility. So what happens now? That's up to you." There was a long silence. Then, "The kids ask about you. Rebecca tells them Grandpa is busy with his farm project. They're welcome to visit any time. All of them, including you." "Under what conditions?" "No conditions, Gary. Just don't ask me about the land." Spring arrived early that year. By March, the community garden was thriving with neat rows of lettuce, radishes, and early peas. I spent most of my mornings there, teaching young people how to test soil pH, when to plant cool season crops, how to identify beneficial insects versus pests. There was something healing about watching children discover the miracle of seeds becoming food. Their excitement reminded me of Gary at that age, before disappointment and greed had hardened his heart. One afternoon in May, I was showing a group of teenagers how to build proper compost bins when I saw a familiar figure watching from the fence line. Gary looked thinner, older. His clothes were clean but worn, and he carried himself differently, humbler, somehow. I finished the lesson and walked over to him. "Hello, son." "Dad." He nodded toward the gardens. "Looks good. It's growing. Listen, I got a job. At Peterson's feed store. It's not much, but it's honest work." "That's good, Gary. Rebecca brought the kids by last week. They love what you've done here." I waited. Gary had something more to say. "I've been going to meetings. AA meetings. Not because I drink too much, but because, well, they talk about addiction to other things too. Gambling, money, shortcuts to happiness." "How's that going?" "Hard. But I'm starting to understand some things. About myself. About what I did to you, to my family." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the kids work in the dirt with the focused intensity that only comes from meaningful work. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I broke something that can't be fixed. But I want you to know that I see it now. What you and Mom built here wasn't just about money. It was about belonging somewhere. Having roots. Your mother always said the best fertilizer is the farmer's footsteps in the field." Gary almost smiled. "She used to say that when I was little. I thought it was just something old people said. Wisdom often sounds like nonsense to the young." "Yeah, well, I'm not young anymore." I studied my son's face, lined now with worry and loss, but somehow cleaner than it had been in years. "Gary, there's something I want to show you." I led him to the old oak tree at the center of the property. The one where Martha and I had carved our initials 47 years ago. Beneath our faded marks, dozens of new initials had appeared, carved by the young gardeners as they claimed their connection to this place. "Your mother planted this tree the day we moved here. She said it would outlive us both, and that someday our grandchildren would climb its branches." Gary touched the bark gently, his fingers tracing the old scars and new markings. "I remember her telling me that story. She made me promise to take care of it. The tree doesn't care who owns the deed, Gary. It just grows. These gardens don't care about property values. They just feed people. That's the lesson I was trying to teach you. I wasn't ready to learn it. Are you ready now?" Gary was quiet for a long moment, watching a group of children chase butterflies between the tomato plants, their laughter carrying on the warm spring air. "I'd like to be." 6 months later, Gary moved back in with Rebecca and the kids. He worked evenings at the feed store and spent his mornings helping with the community garden. Not because I asked him to, but because he needed to understand what he'd almost destroyed. The children loved having their father teach them about farming. Rebecca started bringing lunch for the volunteers, setting up picnic tables under the oak tree where families could eat together and share stories about their plants. Gary never asked about inheriting the land. He seemed to understand that his inheritance wasn't property. It was the knowledge of how to nurture growing things, how to build community, how to leave the world better than he'd found it. One evening in October, as we were cleaning tools after the last harvest of the season, Gary said, "Dad, I know I can never make up for what I tried to do, but I want to spend whatever time we have left helping instead of taking." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw traces of the boy who'd once promised to be the best farmer in Iowa. "Your mother would be proud of the man you're becoming," I told him. "I hope so," he said. "I'm trying to earn that." As I write this, I'm 71 years old. The community garden has expanded to cover 35 of the 40 acres. We've added a greenhouse, a teaching pavilion, and a small farm stand where the young gardeners sell their produce. Gary manages the day-to-day operations now. He's good at it, patient with the children, knowledgeable about the plants, careful with the finances. Rebecca helps coordinate volunteers and manages the social media accounts that share our story with people around the world. My grandchildren are regular fixtures at the garden, Dirty Need and Sun Freckled, learning the same lessons I tried to teach their father decades ago. The difference is they're learning them by choice, not obligation. Sometimes visitors ask me if I regret giving up the money I could have made by selling to developers. I tell them that some investments pay dividends that can't be measured in dollars. The laughter of children, the satisfaction of teaching useful skills, the knowledge that this land will continue feeding people long after I'm gone. These returns grow compound interest in the human spirit. Gary understands now that he was never supposed to inherit 40 acres of Iowa farmland. He was supposed to inherit the wisdom to use those acres well, to see them as a trust rather than an asset, to pass on something more valuable than money to his own children. Martha would have loved seeing her great-grandchildren learn to garden in the shadow of her oak tree. She would have been proud that our land became a place where families grow together, where young people learn respect for the earth, where community takes root in rich soil and careful tending. The other day, I overheard my youngest granddaughter explaining photosynthesis to a new volunteer. "Plants eat sunlight," she said seriously, "and they make food for everyone. My grandpa taught me that sharing is how everything grows." That's the legacy Martha and I really wanted to leave. Not property, but perspective. Not wealth, but wisdom. Not what we could take from the earth, but what we could give back to it. Gary learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it. And in teaching it to his children, he's finally become the farmer I always hoped he could be. One who understands that the most important crop you can grow is character. And the best fertilizer for the future is the love you plant today. If you liked this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments below. What would you have done in Henry's situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting what you've built? Let us know your thoughts and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story.